It was a sunny Tuesday morning, and I was already running late for an important meeting. As I pulled into my driveway, ready to rush inside and grab my briefcase, my heart sank. A shiny new Mercedes-Benz was blocking the entrance, effectively trapping my car. Unbelievable, I muttered, slamming my hand against the steering wheel in frustration. I hopped out of the car, ready to confront the inconsiderate driver, only to be met by a well-dressed woman with a Starbucks cup in hand, strolling towards me with an air of entitlement. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, trying to keep my cool. "I'm afraid you're blocking my driveway. I need to get out, and I'm already late for an appointment." The woman, who I would soon come to know as Karen, narrowed her eyes and took a sip of her coffee before responding. "Well, that's not my problem, is it?" she snapped. "I'm just here to visit my friend, and I'll move my car when I'm good and ready." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman had the audacity to completely disregard my needs and inconvenience me without a second thought. "Look, I really need to get out of here," I pleaded. "Is there any way you could move your car for just a few minutes?" Karen scoffed and rolled her eyes. "I told you, I'll move it when I'm done. You can just wait it out like the rest of us." I could feel my blood pressure rising as I struggled to keep my composure. This wasn't the first time I'd encountered a Karen-like situation, but this level of entitlement was truly astounding. Determined to resolve the issue, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, quickly dialing the number for a local towing company. The woman's eyes widened as she realized what I was doing. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice laced with panic. "I'm calling a tow truck to have your car removed," I stated matter-of-factly. "You're blocking my driveway, and I need to get to my meeting." Karen's face contorted with rage, and she quickly stepped in front of my car, as if to physically prevent the tow truck from arriving. "You can't do that," she shouted. "This is my car, and I have every right to park it here. I'll call the police if you even try to have it towed." I couldn't help but chuckle at her audacity. "Well, that's ironic, because I'm about to call the police myself and report you for obstructing my driveway. I'm running late, and I need to get to work. You have 5 minutes to move your car, or the tow truck is coming, whether you like it or not." Karen's eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might actually comply. But then, she did the unthinkable. She pulled out her own phone and began frantically dialing. "What are you doing?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I'm calling the tow truck to have your car impounded," she declared, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "Let's see how you like it." I couldn't believe the sheer nerve of this woman. As I watched her make the call, a spark of mischief ignited inside me, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. As Karen frantically dialed the tow truck company, I couldn't help but feel a sense of amusement at the situation. This woman had the audacity to block my driveway and then try to have my car towed as some kind of twisted retaliation. I knew I had to act quickly before the tow truck arrived, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. Turning to Karen, I put on my most sincere and apologetic expression. "Look, I'm really sorry about this. I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I'm running incredibly late for an important meeting, and I desperately need to get out of here. Is there any way we could work this out? Maybe I could buy you a coffee or something to make up for the inconvenience." Karen's brow furrowed in suspicion, but I could see the slightest glimmer of uncertainty in her eyes. Well, I suppose a coffee wouldn't hurt," she said, her voice slightly softer than before. Seizing the opportunity, I quickly ushered her towards my car, guiding her into the passenger seat. "Fantastic. Let's go to the Starbucks down the street. My treat." As I slid behind the wheel and started the engine, Karen's eyes widened in realization. "Wait, what are you doing? I haven't moved my car yet." "Don't worry, Karen," I said with a reassuring smile. "I'll have you back here in no time. I just want to make sure we get this all sorted out amicably." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. I promise I won't do anything to your car. I just want to have a civilized conversation over a cup of coffee. Is that too much to ask?" Reluctantly, Karen settled back into the seat, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I could tell she was still uneasy, but the prospect of a free coffee seemed to have quelled her anger, at least for the moment. As I navigated the short drive to the Starbucks, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. I had managed to defuse the situation and get Karen away from my driveway, buying myself some much-needed time. Now, I just had to figure out how to turn the tables and get my car out of this mess. Once we arrived at the coffee shop, I ushered Karen inside and motioned for her to find a table while I ordered our drinks. As I waited in line, I discreetly pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my friend, who also happened to be a tow truck driver. "Hey, buddy," I typed. "I've got a bit of a situation here. Can you come to my place and tow a car for me? It's important." Within minutes, I had my response. "Sure thing, man. I'll be there in 10. Grinning, I turned my attention back to the barista, who was handing me 2 steaming cups of coffee. Time to put my plan into action. As I walked over to the table where Karen was sitting, clutching her coffee mug with a wary expression, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The tow truck was on its way, and I was about to turn the tables on this entitled woman who had so brazenly disrupted my day. "Here you go, Karen," I said, placing the steaming cup in front of her. "I hope you like it. I asked them to make it just the way you like it." Karen eyed me suspiciously, but the aroma of the coffee seemed to have a calming effect. "Well, thank you, I suppose," she muttered, taking a cautious sip. I pulled up a chair and settled in across from her, cradling my own cup in my hands. "So tell me, Karen, what brings you to my neck of the woods today?" Karen's eyes narrowed as she regarded me warily. "I already told you, I'm here to visit a friend. Though I fail to see how that's any of your business." I raised my hands in a placating gesture. "Fair enough, fair enough. I was just curious, that's all. I mean, we're going to be spending some quality time together, so I figured I might as well get to know you a little better." Karen's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean, spending time together? I thought we were just having a coffee and then I'd be on my way." I leaned back in my chair, my lips curving into a wry smile. "Well, you see, that's the thing. I'm not exactly in a position to leave just yet." Before Karen could respond, the familiar sound of a rumbling engine outside caught my attention. "Ah, perfect timing," I murmured, glancing towards the window. Karen's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice tinged with panic. "Me?" I feigned innocence. "I didn't do anything. But it seems your little tow truck call has backfired, Karen. Looks like my friend is here to tow your car instead." The color drained from Karen's face as she watched the tow truck pull up to her Mercedes. "No, no, no," she cried, jumping to her feet. "You can't do this." I simply shrugged, taking a leisurely sip of my coffee. "I'm afraid I can, Karen. You see, you were the one who decided to block my driveway and refused to move your car. And now, you're the one who's going to suffer the consequences." Karen whirled around, her eyes wild with desperation. "Please, you have to stop them. This is my car, my property. You can't just take it." I leaned back in my chair, relishing the look of pure terror on her face. "Actually, Karen, I can. And I will. After all, you were the one who called the tow truck in the first place, thinking it would be me who would suffer. Looks like the joke's on you." As the tow truck driver expertly hooked up Karen's car and began to lift it onto the flatbed, her cries of protest only grew louder. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction at the sight of her frantic attempts to stop the inevitable. "This isn't over," she yelled, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'll call the police, and you'll be sorry." I simply shook my head, setting down my coffee cup and rising from my seat. Go ahead, Karen. Call the police. But I think you'll find that they'll be a lot more interested in the woman who illegally parked in someone else's driveway and refused to move. With a final, triumphant smile, I turned and headed towards the exit, leaving a distraught and increasingly desperate Karen behind. The first round was mine, but I had a feeling this was just the beginning of our little battle of wits. As I watched the tow truck driver expertly load Karen's Mercedes onto the flat, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. This entitled woman had the audacity to block my driveway and then try to have my car impounded, all while refusing to move her own vehicle. Now, the tables had turned, and I was the one calling the shots. I turned to the tow truck driver, who was securing the car with a practiced hand. "Hey, thanks for coming out so quickly, man. I really appreciate it." The driver grinned and gave me a friendly pat on the back. "No problem at all, buddy. Anything for a friend in need. Besides, this Karen sounds like a real piece of work. I'm happy to be the one to take her down a peg or two." I chuckled and shook my head. "You have no idea. She's been nothing but trouble since the moment I stepped out of my car." Just then, Karen came storming out of the Starbucks, her face flushed with rage. "You!" she screamed, pointing an accusatory finger in my direction. "What have you done?" I raised my hands in a placating gesture. "Relax, Karen. I haven't done anything. You're the one who called the tow truck in the first place, remember?" Karen's eyes narrowed as she glared at the tow truck driver. "Well, then call them off. This is my car, and you have no right to take it." The tow truck driver just shrugged. "Sorry, ma'am, but that's not how it works. Your car was blocking the driveway, and the owner here called us to have it removed. It's all perfectly legal." Karen let out a frustrated growl and began pacing back and forth, her hands clenched into fists. "This is ridiculous. I demand that you release my car immediately." I stepped forward, my voice calm and measured. "Look, Karen, I tried to resolve this amicably. I even offered to buy you a coffee, and you still refused to move your car. You brought this on yourself." Karen whirled on me, her eyes wild with desperation. "But I can't just leave my car here. I have places to be, people to see. You can't do this to me." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the woman, despite her entitled behavior. After all, having your car impounded is never a pleasant experience, no matter how much you may have deserved it. "I'm sorry, Karen," I said, my tone softening slightly. "But you left me no choice. I was already late for an important meeting, and you refused to cooperate. I had to do something." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but before she could get the words out, the sound of a siren pierced the air. We all turned to see a police car pulling up to the scene, its lights flashing. Karen's face lit up with hope. "Finally, the cavalry has arrived," she exclaimed, rushing over to the officer who had emerged from the vehicle. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she cried. "These men are trying to steal my car." The officer raised a hand, silencing her. "Ma'am, I've been informed of the situation. According to the tow truck driver, your vehicle was blocking a private driveway and the owner called for its removal." Karen's shoulders slumped and her face fell. But that's not fair. I was just visiting a friend. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The officer shook his head. "I'm afraid the law is quite clear on this, ma'am. If you're illegally parked on private property, the owner has the right to have your vehicle towed." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the officer raised a hand to stop her. "However, I can see that this is a bit of a misunderstanding. If you can move your car to a legal parking spot within the next 10 minutes, I'll call off the tow." Karen's eyes lit up with hope, and she quickly nodded. Yes, of course. Thank you, officer." As Karen rushed to her car, the tow truck driver and I exchanged a knowing look. It seemed that the tables had turned once again, and Karen was now the one scrambling to avoid the consequences of her actions. As Karen hurriedly slid behind the wheel of her Mercedes, the tow truck driver, and I watched in silence. The officer stood by, arms crossed, waiting patiently to see if Karen would actually follow through and move her car within the allotted 10 minutes. Karen's hands trembled as she tried to start the engine, and I couldn't help but feel a slight twinge of sympathy. Despite her entitled and destructive behavior, the prospect of having her car impounded was clearly weighing heavily on her. As the engine roared to life, Karen shot me a venomous glare. "This isn't over, you know," she spat, her voice dripping with bitterness. "I'm going to make sure you pay for this." I raised my hands in a placating gesture. "Hey, Karen, I'm just glad we were able to resolve this without too much drama. I was just trying to get to my meeting, same as you." Karen scoffed and shook her head. "Resolve it? You've ruined my day, you pompous jerk. I had important plans, and now I'm running late because of your selfish actions." I couldn't help but chuckle at her dramatics. Selfish actions. You're the one who blocked my driveway and refused to move your car. I think you know things a bit backwards, don't you? The officer cleared his throat, drawing our attention back to the task at hand. "Ma'am, your time is running out. Are you going to move your vehicle or not?" Karen's eyes darted from the officer to the tow truck, and I could see the panic rising in her expression. I'm going," she sputtered, throwing the car into reverse and pulling out of the driveway with a squeal of tires. As Karen peeled out of the parking lot, the officer turned to me with a wry smile. "Well, I must say, you handled that rather well. Most people would have just called the tow truck and been done with it." I shrugged, feeling a sense of satisfaction. What can I say? I like to keep things interesting. Plus, I didn't want to make her life any more difficult than it already was. Even entitled Karens deserve a second chance, right? The officer chuckled and nodded. "True enough. Though I have a feeling this won't be the last we've seen of her." "Oh, I'm counting on it," I replied, flashing him a grin. After all, I still have a meeting to get to, and I'm sure Karen will find some other way to make my life difficult. With a firm handshake, the officer bid me farewell and returned to his patrol car, leaving me and the tow truck driver to our own devices. "Well, that was quite a show," the driver said, shaking his head in amusement. "I gotta hand it to you, though. You really know how to work the system." I laughed and clapped him on the back. What can I say? I've had my fair share of run-ins with Karens over the years. You learn a thing or two about how to handle them. The driver chuckled and climbed back into the cab of his truck. "Well, if you ever need my services again, you know where to find me. Just try not to get yourself into too much trouble, all right?" I waved him off with a grin, already mentally preparing for the next round of my battle with Karen. Something told me that this was just the beginning of a long and entertaining feud. As I watched Karen's Mercedes peel out of the parking lot, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The entitled woman had finally gotten a taste of her own medicine, and I had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time our paths crossed. With a chuckle, I turned and headed back towards my own car, eager to finally make it to my meeting. But just as I was about to open the door, my phone began to buzz in my pocket. Fishing it out, I saw that the caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. Furrowing my brow, I answered the call. "Hello. Is this the man who had my car towed?" A familiar, shrill voice demanded. I couldn't help but groan inwardly. Of course it was Karen. "Yes, this is him," I replied, trying to keep my tone level. "Well, I hope you're happy with yourself." Karen spat. "You've completely ruined my day, and now I'm going to be late for my important meeting." I leaned against my car, bracing myself for the onslaught. "Look, Karen, I'm sorry your day has been disrupted, but you brought this on yourself. You refused to move your car, even after I offered to buy you a coffee and try to resolve this amicably." "That's no excuse," Karen huffed. "You had no right to call a tow truck and have my car impounded. I'm going to file a complaint, and you're going to pay for this." I couldn't help but chuckle at her empty threats. Go ahead and file a complaint, Karen. But I can assure you, the police are well aware of the situation, and they'll be on my side. You were the one illegally parked in my driveway. Karen let out a frustrated growl. This isn't over, you know. I'm going to make sure you regret the day you ever crossed me. I look forward to it, Karen, I replied, a hint of amusement in my voice. In the meantime, I'd focus on getting your car back and making it to your meeting. I'd hate for you to be any more inconvenienced than you already are. Before Karen could respond, I ended the call, cutting off her string of angry protests. Shaking my head, I slid behind the wheel of my car and pulled out of the driveway, eager to finally make it to my meeting. As I navigated the city streets, my mind couldn't help but wander back to the confrontation with Karen. There was something about her unrelenting entitlement and willingness to disrupt others' lives that both fascinated and infuriated me. I had a feeling that this wasn't going to be the last time I crossed paths with her. And somehow, deep down, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of excitement at the prospect of another round in our ongoing battle of wills. After all, what's life without a little drama and a worthy adversary to keep you on your toes? And with a woman like Karen, I had a feeling the drama was just getting started. As I sat in my car, watching the taillights of Karen's Mercedes disappear down the street, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation for the next chapter in our ongoing battle of wits. Despite the frustration and inconvenience she had caused me, there was something almost exhilarating about going head-to-head with someone as unabashedly entitled and obstinate as Karen. She was a force to be reckoned with, and I couldn't help but respect her tenacity, even if it was in service of such a selfish and disruptive cause. As I pulled out of the driveway and headed towards my meeting, my mind began to race with possibilities. What would Karen's next move be? Would she try to take legal action against me? Or would she resort to even more underhanded tactics to get her revenge? One thing was certain. I wasn't going to back down easily. This woman had tested my patience, and I was determined to show her that she couldn't just steamroll over anyone who dared to cross her path. When I finally arrived at my meeting, I was greeted by a roomful of concerned colleagues. Apparently, my tardiness had not gone unnoticed, and they were all anxious to know what had happened. I quickly explained the situation, downplaying the drama and focusing instead on the practical concerns of having my driveway blocked. My colleagues, many of whom had experienced their own run-ins with entitled Karens, nodded sympathetically and offered their support. Well, you certainly handled that better than I would have, one of my coworkers remarked, shaking his head. I probably would have just called the cops and had her car towed right away. I chuckled and shrugged. What can I say? I like to keep things interesting. Besides, I have a feeling this isn't the last we've seen of Karen. The meeting continued, and I did my best to focus on the agenda at hand. But try as I might, my mind kept drifting back to the confrontation with Karen and the potential fallout that might be on the horizon. As the meeting drew to a close, my phone buzzed with a new text message. Glancing down, I felt a twinge of trepidation when I saw that it was from an unknown number. You think you're so clever, don't you? The message read. Well, just wait until you see what I have in store for you. I couldn't help but chuckle at the melodramatic tone. It was clear that Karen was still seething with rage and determined to get her revenge. But rather than feeling intimidated, I felt a surge of excitement. Bring it on, Karen, I muttered under my breath, a confident smile spreading across my face. I'm ready for you. With that, I pocketed my phone and headed out of the meeting, already mentally preparing for the next round in our ongoing battle of wits. As the days passed, I found myself constantly on the lookout for any signs of Karen's retaliation. I half expected to find my car vandalized or receive another angry phone call from the entitled woman. But to my surprise, the silence was deafening. I couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, I had managed to get through to her, or at the very least, shake her enough to make her reconsider her course of action. But knowing Karen, I doubted that was the case. Sure enough, my suspicions were confirmed a week later when I returned home from work to find a stack of papers tucked under my windshield wiper. Furrowing my brow, I plucked them from their perch and made my way inside, bracing myself for whatever Karen had cooked up. As I settled into my living room and began to sift through the documents, my eyes widened in disbelief. It was a lawsuit, a formal legal complaint filed by none other than Karen, alleging that I had unlawfully had her car impounded and was seeking damages. I couldn't help but let out a frustrated groan. Of course, Karen wouldn't let this go so easily. She was determined to make me pay for the humiliation and inconvenience I had caused her, even if it meant dragging me through the courts. But as I delved deeper into the complaint, a smirk slowly spread across my face. Karen had clearly done her research, but in her haste to get her revenge, she had made a critical mistake. The lawsuit was riddled with factual inaccuracies and legal inconsistencies, and it was clear that she had not consulted a lawyer before filing it. This was nothing more than a desperate attempt to intimidate me and exact her own twisted sense of justice. Without hesitation, I set to work drafting a response, methodically dismantling Karen's claims and laying out the clear-cut facts of the situation. I knew that the courts would see through her transparent ploy, and I was eager to turn the tables on her once again. As I carefully compiled my evidence and legal arguments, a sense of vindication began to take hold. Karen had thought she could bully and manipulate her way to victory, but I was determined to show her that there were consequences for her entitled behavior. When the day of the court hearing arrived, I strode into the courtroom with confidence, ready to face off against my adversary. Karen, on the other hand, looked frazzled and out of her element, her eyes darting around the room as if she were a cornered animal. As the judge listened to both sides of the argument, it became increasingly clear that Karen's case was without merit. The tow truck driver and the police officer who had been present that day corroborated my version of events, and the judge swiftly dismissed the lawsuit with a stern warning to Karen about the consequences of filing frivolous claims. As Karen stormed out of the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. I had won the battle, but I knew that the war was far from over. Karen was not the type to give up so easily, and I had a feeling that she would be back, determined to find a new way to get her revenge. But this time, I was ready. I had learned from our previous encounters, and I knew that I couldn't let my guard down, no matter how confident I felt. Karen was a formidable opponent, and I would need to stay one step ahead of her if I wanted to emerge victorious in the end. As I made my way home, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Who would have thought that a simple case of a blocked driveway could lead to such a delightfully dramatic showdown? I had a feeling that this was just the beginning of a long and entertaining feud, and I couldn't wait to see what Karen had in store for me next.